ESPN's newest 30 for 30 documentary is I'm Just Here for the Riot, the infamous day in Vancouver City history after they lost to the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup Finals. And we have our directors here, Kathleen, Jayme, and Asia Youngman. And the first thing I want to ask is there are a lot of reasons given for these riots. What do you think was the biggest contributing factor to it?
I think it's the perfect storm of all these factors coming together. I don't know if that's the answer that they're looking for, but I think it was a very complicated and complex night, and I hope that we hope the film kind of explores that and shows that. There were like a ton of factors that went into Vancouver breaking into a riot a second time in our city's history.
Well, one of the questions that comes up is like a lot of people blame it on social media, but as you said, this is the second riot. There was another one that happened in 1994 for pretty much the same reasons. But do you think social media is definitely a culprit in this? People just wanting content and not doing anything about it and just pulling out their cameras and their phones and letting it happen?
I think it absolutely is. I wouldn't necessarily blame it for it happening a second time, but I do think it played quite a big factor in people deciding to stay downtown or even drawing people into the city so that they could get their own selfie or get their own video footage from that night. Because a lot of the people that we spoke to, they were familiar with 1994. They almost wanted their own souvenir from 2011. And of course, Facebook and Twitter were in their infancy in those days, and I don't think a lot of people understood the repercussions of posting online, of hashtagging Vancouver Riot, and essentially incriminating themselves by doing so.
Do you think, and I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the documentary film director that you talked to in your film, but he kind of said, well, there's the people that actually did the damage, and that was a terrible thing to do, but then there were people who stood by and took pictures of that. Do you think those people should also be held responsible?
I think they definitely played a role and played a part. I think there are people who went downtown with the intention to riot. There are people downtown who, thought that, hey, maybe there's a riot might break out, and I kind of want to check it out. And those people either got swept up in, mob mentality, or they just added to the congestion. That made it very difficult for people for the police to get people to get out of downtown, or they actually cheered on and gave an audience to those who were, posing for photos or videos for social media. So I think there's a lot of different, a lot of different factors that played out that night.
You hear that a lot in the documentary. We got wrapped up in it. To me, I can't really consider that an excuse. I've been in a couple situations, not as terrifying as that, but my first instinct was to just get the hell out of there. And this shows that a lot of people said the big question, I don't want to give away, I don't want to spoil anything, but the big question is, well, don't tell me you've never been young and dumb. I still find it hard, and I have been, believe me, I've done my share of really stupid stuff, but I find it hard, kind of like the guy who actually did jail time that you talked to. He said he had no sympathy for other people who took a beating online, who got harassed at their jobs, or whose families got harassed. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because I was downtown that night, and I decided to leave once people were, flipping cars and lighting them on fire. I mean, I was 19 at the time, and I easily could have stayed downtown had I not had a ride out of the city. So it's hard to say what I would have done in various situations, but I think mob mentality was something we wanted to explore. And I think in some ways people do use that as a bit of an excuse. They were just swept up in it. But of course, people are capable of making their own decisions in moments. And I think a lot of people chose not to participate in the riot that night as well, as what we can see. So I think it's complicated for sure, and it's complex, and there's not necessarily one definitive maybe reason why someone would partake in that. But I think using mob mentality, and being caught up in something and swept up and having no control over a situation because of that is a bit of an excuse. And I think we're all capable of making our own decisions, even if we're, younger as well.
Canada is the nation of Canada is known as a nation of just nice people, very polite people. That's kind of a Canadian reputation. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. That's definitely. I mean, I don't know if I would call it a stereotype or if that's like a truth. That I think maybe both are kind of true. But yeah, Vancouver Canadians are kind of known as we're polite. Yeah, polite people, and especially in the West Coast, it's kind of like a laid back city too, right?
I don't know. It's just that maybe it's just at certain moments, especially when it involves the national sport, that you're nice, you're polite for so long, but even the nicest person at one point snaps, and maybe that was the case.
Just don't come after our hockey. I think is maybe the lesson here. No, I mean, again, like there's a huge amount, like so many factors that led up to that night. The fact that the Canucks were up in that series, and it had to go to a game 7. The fashion that we lost it in, the city was so on edge that day. Like I remember waking up and you could just feel the tension in the city. Like it was kind of bound to explode, with what was at stake and how I think the city felt like the Canucks, we had kind of fumbled and lost our opportunity to win our first Stanley Cup in the franchise's history.
And before I let you go, how did both of you feel about? I don't know if you saw Metallica's concert film that was kind of half concert film, half drama, based on the riots in Vancouver. How did you guys feel about that, if you were familiar with it?
Yeah, we're a bit familiar with it. I think there's a lot of examples, especially in Vancouver. I think there was a Guns N' Roses concert as well where we rioted. So the city has a history of rioting and behaving poorly when we don't get our way. And just like kind of tying back to what you're saying, it's like we, in Canada and in Vancouver in particular, we have this sort of very peaceful kind of representation of what the city's like. But I think seeing these examples of us rioting over things that we shouldn't be rioting over says a lot. And it's like, what's happening underneath the surface of society where we're choosing to behave this way over something, like a hockey game. So there's definitely lots going on under the surface. And, Kat and I tried to explore as much of it as we could in the film, but I think there's definitely more that could be explored as well.
Crazy. So I suggest everybody watch this and ask those same questions. It's a great documentary. It's called I'm Just Here for the Riot. And our directors, Kat Jayme and Asia Youngman, thank you very much for taking the time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Mike.